They say that the safest place in the world is a mother's embrace. We are conditioned to believe this on a biological, almost sacred level. A woman is life. She is warmth, a lullaby in the twilight. But what happens when this instinct for creation mutates? When behind a flawless smile and perfectly styled hair, an abyss opens up, one where there is no room for love or mercy. Look at her, Lori Vallow, a former beauty queen, Miss Texas, the embodiment of the American dream. Dazzling blue eyes that seem to reflect the very sky of Idaho. She always knew how to charm. She knew how to wear the mask of the ideal mother, the caring wife, and the devout parishioner. But beneath that mask, something monstrous was festering, a perverted faith that turned her world into a battlefield between light and darkness. January 2020, sunny Hawaii, the island of Kauai, a true paradise on earth. Lori is relaxing by the pool at a luxury resort, tilting her face toward the warm rays of the sun. Beside her is her new husband, Chad Daybell, a self-proclaimed prophet and author of books about the end of the world. They look like a pair of newlyweds on an extended honeymoon. Laughter, cocktails, strolls on the beach, and not a shadow of grief on the face of the woman whose children, 7-year-old JJ and 17-year-old Tylee, disappeared without a trace months ago. While police across the country are scouring the nation for the missing angels, their mother is calmly picking out a wedding ring. She isn't crying. She isn't pleading for help. She knows the truth, hidden deep underground in an Idaho backyard, among bones and ash. To Lori, they were no longer her children. In her warped reality, they had become zombies, dark entities that stood in the way of her divine mission, and to save their souls, they had to be destroyed. Today, we will peer into the darkest depths of those still waters. We will deconstruct, piece by piece, the story of the doomsday mother, who traded her children for visions of the apocalypse and the embrace of a false prophet. This is a story of how deep faith turns into the perfect tool to justify evil, and how easily we are willing to believe a beautiful mask until the monster's snarl reveals itself behind it. Your likes and comments help promote our videos, and please subscribe to Crime Queen if you appreciate high-quality true crime videos. Thank you. She was that golden child, a vibrant blonde, always dressed to the nines, with that same dazzling American smile that makes people trust you before you even open your mouth. Her family was devout, deeply involved in the life of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. Since childhood, religion wasn't just faith for Lori, it was the framework of her reality. A coordinate system where the world was clearly divided into the chosen and everyone else. In 2004, Lori participated in the Miss Texas beauty pageant. Look at this archival footage. On stage, she radiates confidence. She speaks of family, of God, of her love for children. She wins the title of Miss Congeniality. Ironic, isn't it? The woman who would later become synonymous with betrayal was, in her youth, recognized as the most charming and approachable. At that time, Lori seemed like the embodiment of vitality. She worked as a hairstylist, and her clients adored her. She was that stylist you tell everything to, from husband troubles to intimate secrets. She knew how to listen, or at the very least, she was a virtuoso at pretending to. But behind this flawless facade was a woman who changed husbands as easily as her hair color. By her 30s, she already had 3 marriages behind her. The first, straight after high school, the second, brief and hazy, and the third, with Joseph Ryan, with whom she had her eldest daughter, Tylee. It was in her relationship with Ryan that the first red flags began to appear, those very cracks in her psyche that those around her chose to ignore. Lori accused Joseph of abuse and waged endless legal battles for custody, creating the image of a warrior mother ready to do anything for her child's safety. She moved from city to city, covering her tracks, changing states, traveling thousands of miles in search of a place where she could be the leading lady of her own drama. In 2006, Charles Vallow entered her life. A successful businessman, charming, gentle, and infinitely in love. To Charles, Lori was a prize. He took in her daughter Tylee as his own, and later they adopted JJ, a young boy with autism, the son of Charles's nephew. The Vallow family looked perfect. A big house in Arizona, a spacious backyard where little JJ would run around. Lori seemed like a saint. Raising a child with special needs is hard work that requires endless patience. And Lori managed. She spent hours working with him, monitored his diet, and took him to the best doctors. Her neighbors saw her as a hero. They saw a woman who weighed only 125 pounds, but possessed a willpower capable of moving mountains for her children. But there was another side. Lori was becoming increasingly obsessed, not with motherhood, but with spiritual practices. She began to claim that she heard the voices of angels, that she was special, that she had a direct connection to the heavens. Charles, being a deeply religious man, initially supported her. He didn't see it as a threat. He thought it was just her way of coping with stress. He didn't know that his beautiful Lori had already begun to cross a line where religion turns into psychosis. She started reading books by a certain Daybell, a writer from Idaho who specialized in end-times prophecies. His ideas that the world would soon be destroyed and 144,000 chosen ones would be saved fell on fertile soil. In Lori's mind, a puzzle began to take shape, one where her ordinary life, with JJ's tantrums, domestic problems, and a boring husband, was merely an annoying obstacle to her grand destiny. By 2018, Mrs. Congeniality began to change. Her gaze grew colder. Her speech stranger. She spoke more and more often about how the people around her weren't exactly people, that some of them had turned dark, that their souls had been displaced by demons. It was the beginning of the end. Lori Vallow was still smiling in family photos, but a coldness had already settled inside her. That same coldness that would later allow her to look at her children's empty beds without a single tear. She didn't yet know that she would soon meet her prophet, and that this meeting would be a death sentence for everyone who loved her. At first glance, Chad is the total opposite of the vibrant Lori. Awkward, slightly overweight, with a soft voice and dull manners. He lived in the quiet town of Rexburg, Idaho, wrote low-budget eschatological novels, and worked as a part-time gravedigger at a local cemetery. But to Lori, he wasn't just a writer, he was a prophet. Their connection ignited instantly. This wasn't just an affair, it was a shared psychosis. Chad whispered to Lori exactly what she was desperate to hear, that they had been husband and wife in past lives, that they were the chosen leaders destined to head the 144,000 righteous during the second coming. "You are a goddess, Lori," he told her, and Lori believed him, because the role of a goddess suited her much better than the role of a mother to a child with autism. It was then that a terrifying word entered their vocabulary: zombies. Chad developed an entire rating system of light and dark. According to his theory, if a person became too dark, their true spirit would leave the body and a demon would take its place. They called such a being a zombie. And here lies the most chilling detail of their motivation. They believed, or convinced themselves, that killing such a body was an act of mercy. You weren't killing a person, you were simply releasing their soul by destroying the earthly shell. The first on the dark list was Lori's husband, Charles Vallow. By early 2019, Charles was terrified. He saw his wife changing before his eyes. She spent thousands of dollars on esoteric webinars, locked herself in rooms and whispered incantations to cast out demons. At one point, Lori point-blank told him, "You aren't Charles anymore. An entity named Nick lives inside you. And if you stand in my way, I will destroy you." Charles pleaded with doctors for a psychiatric evaluation. He called the police, his voice trembling with fear on the recordings. "She says I'm a zombie! She's threatening to kill me!" he screamed into the receiver. But the police saw a calm, well-groomed, smiling blonde. Lori flirted with the officers, joked, and appeared perfectly sane. Who would believe a frightened man when standing before Mrs. Congeniality? Lori's motive was dual. On one hand, religious delusion. On the other, cold, icy pragmatism. Charles had insured his life for $1 million. The death of a zombie promised not only spiritual cleansing, but a very comfortable earthly existence. In July 2019, Charles was shot dead by Lori's brother, Alex Cox. Alex claimed it was self-defense. Lori, meanwhile, was calmly making breakfast for the children in the next room. She didn't even approach her husband's body when the police arrived. She simply asked when she could take the car. After Charles's death, almost no obstacles remained. But there were the children. 7-year-old JJ and 17-year-old Tylee. They required attention, they asked questions, and they interfered with Lori and Chad enjoying their divine romance. In September 2019, Lori packs her bags. She loads the children into the car and drives nearly 800 miles from warm Arizona to cold Rexburg, Idaho, closer to her prophet. She tells friends that Tylee and JJ have also turned dark. She sees not love in her own son's eyes, but the reflection of a demon. The cracks in her mind had turned into a canyon. She was no longer a mother. She was a warrior of light, preparing to bring the most horrific sacrifice to the altar of her madness. Chad was waiting for her in Rexburg, and in his backyard a place had already been prepared for those who had become extra in their new perfect world. September 8th. The last day Tylee Ryan was seen alive. A 17-year-old girl, vibrant, headstrong, who protected her younger brother like a lioness. On that day, they set off for Yellowstone National Park. In the surveillance footage detectives would later find, Tylee looks exhausted. She stands against the backdrop of the majestic geysers, huddling in her jacket. She doesn't yet know that her end is only a few hours away. They return to Rexburg late. According to phone records, Lori's brother, Alex Cox, was in his sister's apartment that night. And at 2:42 a.m., his phone was pinged on Chad Daybell's property. Imagine the scene, the silence of an Idaho farmyard, the darkness so thick you could touch it. Alex Cox, his sister's loyal hound, her angel of vengeance, is digging in the area of Chad's pet cemetery. Tylee was no longer a niece or a daughter to them. In their insane script, she was a dark spirit that had to be not just killed, but physically obliterated, so that not a single particle of the zombie remained on this earth. Tylee's body was dismembered and burned in a fire pit. Her remains, what was left of them, were packed into a plastic bucket and buried deep beneath a layer of sod. While the fire consumed his daughter's flesh, Lori was likely sleeping, or praying, or planning her new life with Chad. Not a single call to the police, not a single cry for help, only a cold, cosmic indifference. But JJ remained, a 7-year-old boy with autism who constantly asked, "Where's Tylee?" He was too loud, too alive. His energy irritated the goddess. September 22nd, JJ's last morning. He is sitting on the couch in his favorite red pajamas with Prince. He weighs only 50 pounds, a tiny, fragile child who trusted his mother more than anything in the world. That evening, Lori would tell her friends in the cult that JJ had turned into a zombie. She would describe how he climbed on cabinets and broke things, claiming a demon named Hevos had possessed him. That night, Alex Cox comes to Lori's apartment again. He takes the sleeping boy. JJ wasn't burned. He was killed with methodical cruelty. A plastic bag was placed over his head and wrapped with duct tape. His wrists and ankles were also bound with the adhesive. He couldn't breathe. He couldn't struggle. The small body in the red pajamas was wrapped in black trash bags and driven to that same spot on Chad Daybell's property. He was buried under the birch trees. Chad would later text his wife, Tammy, who was still alive, that he had shot a large raccoon and buried it in the pet cemetery. A raccoon. That is what he called a 7-year-old child. Now look into Lori's psychology during these days. Hours after her son was buried in the dirt, she goes online. She isn't looking for lawyers. She isn't looking for comfort. She orders a wedding dress and 2 malachite rings on Amazon. She picks out swimsuits for a trip to Hawaii. In her world, the children weren't dead. They were deleted from the equation, like old files from a hard drive. She acted as if they had never existed. When neighbors asked where JJ was, she would respond with a light smile. "Oh, he's at his grandma's," or "He's in Arizona." This wasn't an impulse. This wasn't a heat of passion. It was a cold, calculated plan to clear her living space for her great mission. She disposed of her children the way one disposes of old furniture before moving into a new home. And the most terrifying part, she was absolutely certain that God approved of her every step. The bloody harvest was only beginning. After all, in Chad and Lori's script, there was one more figure that had to leave the stage: Chad's legal wife, Tammy Daybell. The path to paradise on earth was paved with the bodies of those who loved them most. But before the world would learn of the children's disappearance, another domino had to fall. October 19th, 2019. Tammy Daybell, Chad's legal wife and the mother of his 5 children, suddenly dies in her bed. She was only 49 years old. She was a healthy, active woman who ran several miles a day. Chad refused an autopsy, claiming she simply went to sleep and didn't wake up. The local coroner, suspecting nothing out of the ordinary in the quiet religious town, recorded the cause of death as natural. Just 2 weeks after Tammy's funeral, Lori and Chad fly to Hawaii. Imagine the contrast. In Idaho, the ground is gripped by the first frosts, while on the beaches of Kauai, the air is warm to 82 degrees Fahrenheit. There, to the sound of the crashing surf, Lori in a white sundress and Chad in a bright shirt exchange vows of loyalty. They dance, they laugh, and they take photos at sunset. On Lori's finger is that very ring purchased on Amazon just days after her son's death. This isn't just a lack of mourning, it is a maniacal celebration. They believed their mission had begun. They were free from debt, from obligations, and from children. The alarm was raised by those Lori considered a mere nuisance on her path, Kay and Larry Woodcock, JJ's grandparents. They were used to regular FaceTime calls with their grandson, but since September, Lori had been coming up with 1,000 excuses. "He's busy. He's sleeping. We're at the zoo." Her voice on the phone was always soft, but a metallic edge had begun to creep in. By late November, the Woodcocks' patience snapped. They contacted the Rexburg police to request a welfare check. November 26, 2019. Detectives knock on Lori's door. The body cam footage from the police officers is a textbook on manipulation. Lori opens the door. She is smiling. She is flirting. She's in loungewear, looking like an ordinary woman interrupted from her chores. The detective asks, "Where is JJ?" Lori, without blinking, replies, "Oh, he's in Arizona with his friend Melanie." She says it so confidently, so matter-of-factly, that the officers initially believe her. She even complains about Kay Woodcock, calling her crazy and accusing her of trying to take her son away. She plays the role of the persecuted victim. But when the detectives leave to verify the information, the mask slips. Lori realizes time is up. That very night, she and Chad hastily pack their suitcases. They leave everything behind: the children's clothes, school backpacks, even JJ's essential medications. They simply vanish into the night, heading for the airport. When the police returned the next morning with a warrant, the apartment was empty. The air inside was heavy and stagnant. In the garage, they found abandoned bicycles. In the closets, children's clothes that still smelled of laundry detergent and home. No, the children themselves were nowhere to be found. Lori and Chad surfaced in Hawaii. They moved into a luxury condominium, ignoring calls from detectives and court orders. In January 2020, Idaho authorities issued an ultimatum. Lori Vallow was ordered to produce the children to the court within 5 days. Images of the doomsday couple flooded the global media, reporters cornering Lori and Chad by a pool in Hawaii. "Lori, where are your children?" the journalists scream. She is silent. She slowly puts on her sunglasses, adjusts her hair, and walks past with a slight smirk at the corners of her mouth. There is no fear in her eyes. Instead, there is superiority. She is certain that for the chosen ones, the laws of men do not apply. She didn't know that at that very moment, the FBI had already begun analyzing her phone data. Piece by piece, they were reconstructing Alex Cox's movements. They already knew about the strange raccoon cemetery in Chad Daybell's backyard. The net was slowly but surely tightening around the neck of the goddess while she soaked up the Hawaiian sun. FBI detectives and local police did titanic work. While Lori sat in her cell, fixing her hair before every court hearing, experts analyzed thousands of geolocation pings from her brother Alex Cox's phone. Alex was the perfect enforcer, but he wasn't a genius. His phone screamed his location. The data pointed to one single spot, the backyard of Chad Daybell's house in Salem, Idaho, a narrow strip of land between the fire pit and the pet cemetery. June 9, 2020. The day truth literally rose from the earth. The temperature that morning rose to 75 degrees Fahrenheit. Dozens of cars swarmed Chad Daybell's home. Chad sat in his car on the shoulder, watching as FBI agents began to dig. He looked like a man whose world was turning to dust, when the shovels hit something hard beneath the layer of sod and boards. Chad slammed on the gas and tried to escape. He was caught a few miles away. What the forensics team found made even the most seasoned investigators shudder. First, they discovered JJ's remains, the small body still in those same red pajamas, wrapped in layers of duct tape and black plastic. He was found under carefully laid stones and branches. A bit further away, in a place Chad called the Green Meadow, they found Tylee, or rather, what was left of her after attempts to destroy the body with fire and acid. This wasn't just a burial, it was an attempt to erase a human being from history. It took weeks for medical examiners to identify her remains. During all of this, in her jail cell, Lori Vallow continued to smile. The investigation also exposed a much more grounded side to the divine mission. It turned out that after the children disappeared, Lori continued to collect their Social Security benefits. She transferred the payments to her account and spent them on new clothes and life in Hawaii. Every zombie on her list brought her money. The death of her husband, Charles, insurance. The death of Tylee and JJ, government benefits. The death of Tammy Daybell, life insurance for Chad's wife totaling over $400,000. It was a perfect business model, wrapped in the packaging of religious ecstasy. Lori and Chad didn't just believe in the end of the world, they were actively monetizing its approach. Investigators found hundreds of text messages. There was no love in them. There was calculation. They discussed the pain ratings of their victims. They planned how to remove obstacles. Lori wrote to Chad about her children as if they were pesky insects. "They are almost gone," she wrote about her own son. Her arrogance was her fatal mistake. She was so convinced of her own exceptionalism that she didn't even bother to dispose of the evidence. She believed the 144,000 chosen would be saved, and the law was for dark souls. But justice, unlike her prophecies, turned out to be very real and very tangible. She sat at the defense table, occasionally whispering to her attorneys and, most chillingly, frequently smiling. That smile, while prosecutors displayed photos of her children's remains, forced jurors to look away. She didn't act like a defendant facing life in prison. She acted like a queen at a reception, forced to endure the company of unpleasant people. The prosecution was ruthless. Prosecutor Lindsay Blake, in her opening statement, delivered a line that became a headline across the globe. Money, power, and sex. That was the true religion of Lori Vallow. For weeks, the jury listened to recorded calls, saw receipts from Hawaiian hotels, and looked at horrific evidence. The most emotional moment was the testimony of her eldest son, Colby Ryan. His voice trembled as he addressed his mother across the courtroom. "Mom, you ruined everything. You killed my sister and brother." Lori looked at him, and there was not a single drop of remorse in her eyes, only cold, evaluating curiosity. Before the sentencing, Lori took the stand. It was a performance that finally confirmed her total detachment from reality. She didn't ask for forgiveness. Instead, she told the court that she communicates with her deceased children and husband, and that they are happy in the world beyond. "I know the truth. Jesus knows the truth. My children, Tylee and JJ, are happy. They are busy doing important work in heaven," she said in her soft, cooing voice. The verdict: guilty on all counts. First-degree murder of Tylee Ryan, first-degree murder of JJ Vallow, conspiracy to commit the murder of Tammy Daybell, grand theft of government funds. Judge Stephen Boyce did not hide his disgust. While handing down the sentence, he said, "You chose the most evil and destructive path possible. You justified your murders with religion, but in reality, you simply wanted to get rid of those who stood in your way." The sentence. Lori Vallow received 5 life sentences without the possibility of parole. In the American judicial system, this means she will never step foot outside of a prison again. No pardons, no second chances. She walked out of the courtroom with her head held high, still slightly smiling. Chad Daybell, her prophet, later received his own sentence, the death penalty. Their apocalypse had arrived, but not at all as they had planned. It arrived in the form of the clang of prison doors, closing behind them forever. The story of Lori Vallow is more than just a chronicle of murders. It is a chilling reminder of how easily the human mind can warp reality to justify the most base desires. Lori wanted freedom. She wanted passion. She wanted money. But instead of simply walking away, she created an entire world where her children became demons and her ego became divine will. She is still there, in a cell at the Pocatello Women's Correctional Center. They say she still maintains her hair and graces her cellmates with that same radiant Mrs. Congeniality smile. She has remained faithful to her mask until the very end, and therein lies the ultimate horror of this case. We look into her eyes searching for remorse, for signs of humanity, for a shadow of grief. But there is only a void. A cold, infinite void of a woman who burned her own life and the lives of her children for the illusion of her own greatness. Cherish your loved ones. And remember, sometimes the most terrifying evil doesn't hide in the shadows or back alleys. Sometimes it smiles at you from family photos, promises eternal love, and wears the mask of the ideal mother. All while a bottle of poison or a tablet with one-way tickets to a place where there is room for no one but herself clinks quietly in her purse. In Lori Vallow's world, the end of the world has already arrived, and it wasn't grand. It smelled of scorched earth, cheap plastic, and damp dirt in a backyard in Idaho. Like this story if you found it interesting, and subscribe to the channel. I look forward to reading your thoughts on this case in the comments below.